Incremental readings. That's the 18th section of the Pleasurable Guide to SuperMemo, the Fluency cycle. And it's dedicated to closing, close deletions, and applying done. This encapsulates the incremental reading loop. Starts with importing or reading and finishes with applying done. Since there's not much sauce on applying done, it is merged with the close deletion. So what we are going to see. The introduction of close deletion. How it works, the advantages, the cons, why it creates a new child, why there are no QA elements in incremental reading. At the beginning, you can do it, but it defaults to close deletion. Why you cannot execute close deletions on items, what I call the monster close deletions, which is a feature, is something that you can do, not something you should avoid necessarily, as long as you're aware of what it is. How closing affects topic priority, why SuperMemo doesn't remove parent articles when you make closes, something high yield as a newbie that you will ask. Oh, what is a new card, a new item? Hey, why are there no such thing in SuperMemo? Then about formulation, albeit again, I will have a separate course about formulation of knowledge, how to do the flashcards, with or without AI. We are only covering the mindset, the good cases. So we're not going in detail to apply the 20 rules of formulation. But we will see still a very overlapping features of this. So I divide into the three different approaches: the Bricklayer, the Sculptor, and the Gardener. Three different ways to do it. One is not better than the other. It's just three different ways to process it. Comparing all of them, and then finally we'll introduce the apply done. We'll see what is deleted, how to do it in bulk, then how to identify when a topic is just done. You apply done or it was just dismissed, so there's still content. When to apply done, when not to apply done, and finally here, the big picture of all of the topic flow diagram. So everything that could happen, all of the scenarios, since this is new until it's done. Everything you could do in SuperMemo, seen on the Fluency cycle, which is most of that. You'll see it's rather complex, and it is like some manner to do a recap of all of the prior sections, reading, extracting, splitting, and closing, and to see the big picture. That, okay, we have seen this in a sequence, but it's been so long that perhaps you have forgotten something if you don't have created flashcards. Now let's see this, the big picture. Oh, that's everything I can do. And when you see this visually, it will make more sense. So by the end of this section, you will be able already to do incremental reading on yourself. What's left is not that important. Well, it's a special petition. Is now that you have the items, how they will be scheduled and so on. Reference, searching, knowledge tree, put images, but those are details. At least the bare bones are already here. And you may have realized that those sections are very theoretical. So in the perspective of SuperMemo, the prior sections were a lot harder, a lot more nomenclature, menus to navigate, and so on. Here it's the opposite. Albeit, in the long term, those will be the hardest. Because in incremental reading, the hardest thing to do, to achieve, is the skill set. Not mastering the toolkit. That's easy to do. So without further ado, let's start the section. Let's start finally with close deletion. We have seen the incremental reading loop, starts from importing and reading, extracting, and finally closing. But before going to details, let's see what actually is a close deletion, or the art of the blank. So when you read a sentence, and a word or a combination of words, can be more than just one, are missing, are deleted, your brain automatically fills it in. Perhaps this ever already happened to you. It was not a flashcard, it was omitted for some reason, and hey, My brain is trying to fill in the text, right? That's the core idea behind the cloze deletion. It's a learning technique where you have a piece of text and strategically remove a key piece of information, creating a blank. So actually, you don't have a question. It's usually formulated as a statement, and something is missing. Compare the capital of Spain is Madrid. Which is the capital of Spain? Madrid. Which is the capital of Spain? Madrid. One is just the first one is just a statement. Okay. The goal isn't to test your grammar, but like you could drill in English, I think, like textbook kind of thing. But to force your brain to actively recall the hidden concept, and that's the beauty of it. You let your brain a chance to recall. You don't provide the answer. It will become passive. It's there. If it's there, the answer, it's just passive review. And it's an art because once you know how to use it, how to formulate well, it's super powerful for what's not there, for what is not written. The very implicit cues you can have, but this is a massive skill to get. That won't be part of this course, the formulation. We will cover just the basics, but I will have a standalone course for formulation because this is not just about SuperMemo, it is agnostic to the software. Awesome. So then the cloze deletion transforms passive reading into an active challenge. And that's what you want for memorization, for long-term memorization, active recall. So think like an analogy would be a mental jigsaw puzzle. You're not just looking at the finished picture. You're finding the exact piece that fits into the empty space. So perhaps, if it's, let's say it's a dog and it's a missing piece, you can already tell it's a dog. And even if it's missing 3 pieces, right? But that's not just about it. You also need to know what is exactly missing. So the skill to get the shape exactly or the orientation of the missing piece is what you want as well. Not just a big picture. Ah, it's a dog. So here we have the most cliché example. So the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That is a statement. Then the cloze deletion would be the the blank is the powerhouse of the cell. But wait, where do I place the blank? I place the blank of what I want to remember, what I want to recall. So in SuperMemo, if I have this, I will select mitochondria and then do Alt-Z. And it will appear in this color, usually orange by default. Means I have closed that, and now I have the cloze deletion. Here you go. I have black. You will by default it's yellow. The answer is mitochondria. But perhaps what I wanted to remember is what it is. Is the power what of the cell? Oh, is the powerhouse of the cell. So I have a different flashlight for this. That's the beauty of SuperMemo because you can do this incrementally. I have now done 2 cloze deletions. I would have done 1, iterate, and the next repetition to this one. And we will see that can you do overlapping cloze deletions, more than 1 cloze deletion, and stuff like that. But for now, it's just introducing cloze deletion. So the format of a question, what is the powerhouse of the cell, is exactly what I did, the second one. What is the powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondria? The first one I did. Is the same cognitively, semantically is the same, but cognitively it's a different path because it's a statement, not a question. So the simple fact of creating a blank So the simple fact of filling in the blank creates a strong memorable connection in your mind. But you need to apply the 20 rules of formulation, or it will be crap in the long term. So now we have presented the Clozelations in SuperMemo, or shall I say, in incremental reading. The Clozelations isn't just a gimmick. It's backed by cognitive science. It's been decades that is used in incremental reading and spaced repetition, but there's nothing new. People did this with pen and paper before that. So the effectiveness lies in the principle called active recall. And that's a massive difference. Why? Because in SuperMemo, you can have both. If you really want, you could have items, flashcards, which already gives you the answer and it becomes passive review. Something you would practice perhaps that you come from Anki, right? This becomes useless. Even for language, it will become useless. To summarize, passive review. You simply read or highlight text. It feels productive, but often creates an illusion of knowing. I will forget it anyways. An active recall forces your brain to retrieve information from scratch without any cues. It's a free active recall because you could have cute active recall with hints or cues, which you can also do in SuperMemo. You add the hint if you want. But this will just weaken your recall in the long term. So you're doing yourself a disservice. This is like exercising a muscle. The effort itself strengthens the memory. That's what you do. In spaced repetition, you just want the minimum number of repetitions required to keep that memory in your brain. So you need to revisit it, all the synapses and all of this. By just doing the synapses, you're reinforcing this. So the learning is an active process. We learn by doing. Only knowledge that is used sticks in your mind. But have this is still mainstream, that you can still memorize half knowledge that you don't apply. Because artificially you have the repetition on incremental reading or spaced repetition. But if it's not there, whatever you don't do, guarantee the minimum repetition, sayonara baby. So Clozelations make active recall effortless to create and practice. Each blank is a mini workout for your memory, an anatomic workout, we could say. And why Clozelation? Because it's the easiest. I just headline the text, I press a button, and that creates a flashcard. I don't need to reformulate into question and answer and ask, what is the na-na-na, all of this, which I can, of course, but it's not the easiest. So by default, incremental reading has Clozelation. So that's the general overview. So as you were expecting, here there's no science. That person says that, this research group that, no. Very high level. If you don't believe the science, just search for it, and that will be it. It's very, very well known for a long time for a very long time. Just in case you had the bias that, no, I want question and answer, not Clozelations. Or now that I use AI, why should I use Clozelation if I use AI, right? Let's see now the benefits or the pros of Clozelation. So if you integrate Clozelations into your study routine, you'll have some advantages. Efficiency, context, precision, and combat one of the illusions, of many, the illusion of knowing. Let's see each one of those. Efficiency, something we hinted already. You quickly convert your notes, at the end of the day, text in a topic in SuperMemo, notes, reading material, into high volume of effective flashcards. And that is the key. It doesn't say efficient, it's effective. So even though it's efficient in the speed you do. But the quality, if it's just effective, by default, it just does the job. You need to iterate. We need to iterate with knowledge formulation to become effective squared, let's say. Then context is key. Unlike traditional cards, mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell, the close deletion keeps the information on its original context, which improves understanding. And that is the first step, because you have verbatim what you converted. When you pressed Alt-Z in SuperMemo, it stays the same. Whatever it was in the sentence is verbatim, the same thing. Which in this case is a pro, because you keep exactly what you had before doing the close deletion. You don't want that at the end of the day, but you want that at the first repetition, just in case you lose context. Next is precision. A close deletion allows you to target the exact piece of information you want to remember within a sentence. If you remember what we did the mitochondria, no, I want to remember who is responsible for that. So the word, let's say, it's mitochondria, the jargon in English. No, not that I know the name, I want to know what it does, right? So I can pinpoint precisely what I want to remember. If it was a more complex sentence, because this is quite easy, who discovered that, or in which year, and whatever. So it can be very precise of what I want to remember. And then combats the illusion of knowing. That was a con, so if you remember, that we have seen previously. You either know the answer to the blank or you don't. There's no hiding. Imagine the question, what is the mitochondria? I can answer the power cell of the cell. That's it. Or I can be more specific and provide more details, right? But could be the case that, you answer something differently, but are only irrelevant details, but are true, are correct. Therefore, you live in a gray zone, unlike close deletions. You know that or you don't. There's nothing else. Unless you close an entire paragraph. Please don't. So these are more or less the general advantages of close deletions. Keep in mind there are also cons, and should I say, there are more cons than pros at the beginning, when you're a newbie. But the long term, when you fully master incremental reading, what's more powerful are the close deletions. But not at the beginning. Let's see one of the main cons of close deletions in incremental reading. The first one is losing the forest for the trees. This goes more or less on following the meta-analogy of the big picture. What can you do is over-closing text. You do close too much, like in just one word. You fragment it too much. If you are prone to this, and if you do it, you'll have a knowledge of a very isolated facts. I know who discovered that thing, that year, that place, like this, for this reason, that material, and that's it. Okay, I don't want to, I really prefer to be generalistic, but let's say penicillin. It was that guy, that year, was actually by serendipity, was a mistake. They were not looking for that. Okay. And I could know a lot of details about history, how they did that. But I can do a lot of close deletions to the minimum intricate detail. But how do penicillin helps the people with infections? I don't know. I just memorized a lot of trivia facts because I have done a lot of close deletions as I was reading the Wikipedia page. That's a bad practice. Not because you can actually do it, means you have to do it. Because remember the questions we have seen already with the extracts. Is this meaningful? Is this applicable? If you're in those details, you haven't checked the boxes before that. Then you might be able to fill in the blank, but still be unable to summarize the main idea of the paragraph. That is especially the key for Anki users. And not just because of Anki per se, is because in Anki you only have the flashcards. Therefore, you will be prone to Ankify a source. So you go by sequence and you convert it into flashcards. And then you don't visit the source once again. unless you have issues with the flashcards, right? This has a lot of cons to do this in sequence. But what's going to happen? You sacrifice the iterations, you sacrifice incrementalism, so you start doing flashcards without understanding the big picture, without seeing the big picture. You just do, like, to summarize, like a parrot. I'm just converting facts, sentences, into close deletions or question and answers as I'm reading. I don't get it yet. With incremental reading, you can do it because you have the reading material, right? Not here. So therefore, you end up in a very weird position that you can recall, and sometimes scarily quick, in a split second, you can recall the answer to every question, to every flashcard. But that doesn't translate to understanding. You have still the narrative that, okay, I memorized the first paragraph, but I still don't get how penicillin works. No idea. But I can tell you a lot of facts about it, to follow the same example. We have an analogy, in case it's too abstract. So it's like knowing the name of every single brick in the house, but having no idea what the house actually looks like. Or, if it was Minecraft, I have the inventory, every single block I need, and I know every single name of each block, which, by the way, I don't, just in trees and rocks. There are so many different ones. Imagine I spend my time to memorize that, but yeah, that doesn't translate to actually build the house. Nice. That's one of the cons of close deletion. Now let's go with the second one, the passive learning trap. But wait. We have seen that a close deletion converts passive material to active recall, right? How is that possible? Let's dig into that. Your brain is a master of finding the easy way out. Always defaults to the cheapest. It will take a heuristic, even if you don't want to. Then, could be the case that after some reviews, you have seen this flashcard more than once in SuperMemo, so the first one you created counts as the first one, and you see it at least once or more in an item format already. You may recall the missing word simply from the shape of the sentence, not from genuine understanding of the concept. This is still a thing. This can be a thing also if you come from Anki. More or less for the same thing, same reason as the first con, but not limited to it. This also happens in SuperMemo, especially the case if you're like me, that yeah, I still have several templates, but I always use the same, virtually always, unless it's for a different language, a different script. If it's Roman letters, I will use the same font size, font family, colors, and all of this. So only the background color, changes and stuff like that. That means that regardless of the templates, if I use them, the content will look the same. Meaning that I can memorize, for instance, this because I remember that else is isolated. If the component had a different shape, like this, because some people try to combat this trap by artificially changing this. So you can have scripts or add-ons, in case of Anki, that changes the width, the font size a little, so you can get some variation. But that is not a solution, because you're not tackling the real problem. The source of the problem is not the same thing. Instead of genuine understanding of the concept, you answer, oh yeah, I remember the flashcard that ends with else in isolation. It's mitochondria. I don't even remember why now. But now I'm cheating because my brain is making different associations. Instead of thinking about the powerhouse, instead of thinking about the powerhouse of the cell and so on, it's doing, hey, it had the title, or this image, this slide, that I recognize, or like a pattern that it was just else, mitochondria. This is useless. This is only useful if you have an exam when you need to throw up all of this information in this way. Other than that, 100% useless. Then all of this leads to a false sense of mastery, false sense of memory, false sense of understanding, false sense of progress, false sense of learning. You're learning. You're doing what's called asemantic learning, which is one of the worst. And not just that, you're not just wasting your time. You are actually harming your brain, not the point of this video. Then, you can fill in the blank, but you can explain the concept to someone else? No. Quoting one young man, to know and not to do is not to know. If I know something but I don't do it, it's the same as if I don't know it. I need to apply it. I hope this is enough. I think it's common enough that I don't need to provide examples and make the video longer. But what is the solution? Well, I have videos already on that. In the course, we're not going to see the aspect of formulation, but anyhow, this is already covered in my channel, Pleasurable Learning. And very short is that you have created the habit that even if you recognize the pattern because the interval has been very low, which is unlikely in SuperMemo, but even if this happens, you still no, let me make the effort to travel the pathway, the synapses, because it's cheating, right? Let me make the effort. This is telling me, hey, let me keep it active. It's the same that I am tired of walking. Let me get a Uber or a bus or a taxi, right? Nope. Just because it's in front of you with the door open, you don't have to take it. It's no, I will walk for the rest of the travel, kind of thing. Not that good analogy, but you get what you mean. Once you have this internalized, this happens almost never. But if you use Anki and you have an add-on just to change the shape and the colors, you will keep the same mistake. You will keep the same problem. You're not solving anything. Now we are going to see the third one, and is the brittle, inflexible knowledge. Memory can become context dependent. Is context dependent. I will even stretch it. It is encoding dependent in some cases as well. But not about this video. Let's just keep it context dependent. Then you might be able to recall the answer only when it's represented with an exact sentence structure. So if you phrase it like this on this specific verbatim wording, I know the answer. Why? Because you memorized phrasing by phrasing. You didn't pay attention, you didn't actually interiorize the meaning. If I change a word by a synonym, or instead of a word that I know it's very low frequency, I use a phrase that more or less is the same thing, but just less succinct, the question or the fact is the same, stays the same. But then I'm lost. Why? Because what I did is memorize verbatim the question to the answer, because I didn't understood the question. I had knowledge gaps. There was a word that, okay, I have seen that word, but I could not tell you what it is, what will be, how to use it, basically, or the meaning. Therefore, I'm able to recall the answer, and that's about it. And if it's presented in a different way, let's say I have AI that repeats the questions from my collection, but is non-deterministic, meaning it will be formulated slightly different. Sometimes it's oopsie-doopsie, I don't know that. So when the same concept appears, but in different forms, or an exam, or in a real-world problem, you might fail to recognize it. Because the true understanding is flexible. It can be applied to novel situations. Let's say the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But powerhouse, I don't know in English, but it's quite common. It's not, it doesn't sound scientific enough, right? So perhaps there's another scientific name for it. I can use it and then, oops, I'm lost. One very example that it just popped in my brain. When I was doing nutrition, there was one question that was embedded into two questions, basically. Because it's how many calories there are in alcohol, in 1 gram of alcohol, which is 0.7, and 7 kilocalories, which are empty calories. Okay, you know that proteins, carbohydrates are 4, and fat are 9. So alcohol is in the middle, and it's 7. Nice. The question was about that, but there was another question embedded, because it didn't use alcohol. It used ethanol, which is the same thing. It's alcohol, but the name that is more scientific, like in chemistry. So I also needed to know this alternative name. Then, I filled the question. Why? Because I know the alcohol has 7 calories per gram. But I didn't know that ethanol, I don't even know how it's pronounced in English, it's alcohol as well. In this case, it's very easy because it's just a label you use for the same concept. But could be the case that it's just how you phrase it, or how you, put into the words the perspective. I'm not going to go into examples, because sometimes it's like through an analogy, sometimes it's the real deal, sometimes it's from the focus of perspective of history, let's say, and some other things. Then is when you really tell that, oopsie, doopsie, I really didn't know that. Not because you do a clozation and you are able to recall the name, the content, you know it. That's why, as a newbie, the clozulations do more harm than anything else. But you need to endure it, to use it, learn from your own mistakes, iterate from your mistakes, and then get the benefits and minimize the cons. The cons will always be there, but it will be disproportional. You get a lot more benefit than cons. Let's say 90-10, 90-10%, or the Pareto principle, to make some heuristic estimation. It's a massive benefit. But at the beginning, you will do a lot of trash clozulations. So remember, inflexible knowledge, losing the big picture, and the passive learning trap. We have seen the three major cons, but the overall umbrella is don't use being able to recall the answer as knowing that fact. It's not the same thing. Let's discuss why clozing, making a clozulation, creates a child. You may have noticed already when we did the mitochondria. Every time we did a clozulation, it created one child. Okay, but why? What's the reasoning behind this choice? First, is preservation of context is the core reason. So I know that this, the blank, is the powerhouse of the cell, comes from this parent, and is short enough that the entire content fits in the title. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And this comes from this, I can see all of the hierarchy up, all of the ancestors. So I know this comes from clozation, from the incremental reading loop, SuperMemo course, and Pleasurable learning. Awesome. So first, we get the parent article. The big picture. You know it contains the narrative surrounding arguments and subtle details. And the child clause is a specific atomic piece of information you want to remember. And in its repetition, you will be actively tested upon. So just by the position in the knowledge tree, it's giving you some context. That's why it becomes a child. Compare this to using SuperMemo as if it was Anki, in the sense that you don't do incremental reading, and you just right-click, new, an item. So you never have source material at all in SuperMemo, only the flashcard. What's going to happen? That the placement in the knowledge tree doesn't tell you anything. So SuperMemo allows you to have best of both worlds. So we have an analogy. Think of it as highlighting a sentence in a textbook. I'm actually now highlighting as well. Highlighting is useless if you cannot remember which book, chapter, or page it came from. You remember, yeah, I think I did some highlighting. The fact I did it, but that's not enough. The child item, your close relation, is the highlight, and the parent link is the permanent clickable reference to the exact page or paragraph. That, hey, this comes from this specific slide, from this specific text, from this specific chapter, paragraph, from this specific slide, from this specific source, which itself is placed in each section of the course inside the Pleasurable Learning SuperMemo course, Pleasurable Guide to SuperMemo. Then, the principle of gradual automation. Since in incremental reading we're going to break down iteratively complex articles into small and simpler and durable memories, that shall parent structure is mechanism for that. Because, for instance, in the mitochondria, now I know I have done 2. If I only do mitochondria, when I see this again, is, hey, I can do powerhouse if I want to. I don't have to do all of the flashcards in one go, all of the close deletions. Since it's the child, I can see that those 2 are siblings. Therefore, they are close deletions from the same source. Now it's that obvious because it's the same formulating. The same formulation. But if it was complex enough, I can reformulate, and it won't be so obvious they come exactly from the same source, even from the same sentence, in this case. So you start with a large article, you do the Alt-G to do the close deletion, you do another close deletion, becomes a second child, and so on. And the original article remains the source. But this we're simplifying, because could be not the source. If you do Alt-X before, you chunk down as one part of the source in a form of an extract. So this allows you to dismantle articles without losing the original source. And that's the idea, because in incremental reading, you do flashcards you do the entire learning process. So you are interleaving the flashcard with the entire source. All of the learning process takes there. That's why it's a child. In Anki, you don't have that, because in Anki, you only have the flashcards. You can have some metadata if you really want to put it manually of where of the source, but that's pretty much it. What you do with DEX is arbitrary. On top of that, you have facilitating the forgetting the source, which may sound counterintuitive, but the key part of SuperMemo philosophy is to let you forget bulky original article. It's what you want. I only want to remember what I have chosen and in the importance according to the priority I set. And that's it. Everything else is prone to forgetting, and this forgetting is desired. So once you extract the material, you will have folders, and instead of those folders, eventually you will have the items. So they are children, of course, and that's why if there were no children, you will be able to have stuff in the folders. Basically, no need to keep reading because we already know that. And then the last reason is organizational and clean workflow. So you know already what when you are in the flashcard, if you want to go to the source, you just go to the parent. And this is systematic. Since it's systematic, you know that, hey, this comes from whatever parent it is. So overall, we could say that it keeps the organization on check. Because if you really do mess up, so you don't do sources, let's say that you, I don't know, to simplify the case that you use Kindle and you just import the XX and just the flashcards, it will become a mess. The knowledge tree will become an absolute mess. So in summary, the Alt-G, the create or remember close deletion, is not just a minor feature. It's a central mechanism that makes incremental reading work. It's part of the loop. It only solves the tension between needing atomic and testable knowledge, and preserving the rich context from the knowledge was derived from. Could be books, blog posts, social media posts, podcasts, movies, textbooks, whatever source there is. Everything mixed together. So now you know that the goal solution should always be a child, and there's 4 big reasons for that. Here's a question for you. We have seen the incremental loading loop that ends with the flashcards, with the items, and we have seen the close deletion. But as you know, there's no way I can do anything and do a question and answer. It has to be a close deletion. I can only create one from scratch, like new item, and then write it down, right? Or the close deletion I did, reformulate it into a question and answer. So you may be thinking, wait. In incremental reading, are there question and answer items? So with a question mark. By default, I mean at the beginning, no. You always start with close deletion, the very hardcore way. That's why it's not even implemented. You can have the close deletion move there right away and reformulate it if you really want question and answer. Or like here, before the extract, remember the sections of the course, you can reformulate this text into QAs, then you will extract the QA and then close deletion the answer. But you will have the question mark and make the close deletion that in fact is not a close deletion. It's just a QA. But you use the flow of incremental reading, if this makes sense, which is close deletion. Okay. Then let's see it from the other way around. The question and answer, the Q&As are not gone. They are just transformed. A close deletion is already a form of question and answer, but the question is implicit. It will be A, fill in the blank of the next statement, and then the statement. Or what is the best word or expression that can fill in this blank, and then the sentence. So this starting question is already implicit, right? So the focus is on the active recall, not the question formulation. And that's why it's so powerful. Once you do it right, you avoid the common mistakes. It's extremely powerful. Not because of how quick it is to create it, but how much information you can encode with so little text. It's like implicitly on steroids. So even for language, the Advanced English collection from 2018, if you want to buy it, you can get 10% off with my link. That's also why I tell that even if you don't care, even if you're even a native of English, and you don't even care about a vocabulary, it's a masterclass of how to formulate flashcards for language learning. Sometimes you say a, the article or noun. With this, you're really telling that the part of a speech is a noun with one character or two. Depends on an apple, you need the N, but you get the point, right? That's an easy way. As long as you have conventions, and for longer you do it, you will have more conventions. It's not just what you're questioning, it's what is not there. Is implicit. What can only be, I don't know, if it was a game like chess or Sudoku, you say, I'm telling you that in this square cannot be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 implicitly. So only a few numbers can be on that square already. Even though I have not tell you anything explicitly, is implicit. There's a lot of information. That's why I'm investing here so much emphasis without examples, because that is the key aspect. I could spend hours showing you examples, you'll get the same conclusion. So the cognitive effort is spent on retrieving the missing information. And that's why the second layer of this, that, hey, why you are not that, remember one of the cons, the inflexible knowledge, or the passive trap, loading trap, that, hey, I'm not a victim of the wording, because the wording is just a trigger to travel and do the mental process, the synapses. So I can have different wording that triggers. At the end of the day, I only want the trigger because I want to retrieve the answer. So the question is just a trigger. Once you see it like this, sometimes I don't even read exactly how it is written even. Sometimes I do it with the slides, but with my flashcards I do the same thing. If once I recalled, oh yeah, it's mitochondria, boom. Then you ask me, hey, what was the question? Precisely how the question was formulated, the precise words, I will have a hard time because I don't know. I do not pay attention to the precise wording. Unless some wording is key, my past self already did this on purpose, and is some of my conventions. So since I recognize the convention, this triggers, but I still don't pay attention. I just recognize the convention, but I still go my own, and I don't read letter by letter or word by word, if this makes sense. That would be true if it was poetry, but we are not doing poetry. That's why your focus is an active recall, because you don't care about the formulation. So you spend all of the mental effort, which is already a big deal, in trying to get the path and recall that memory. Then, QA items are still created, but often for specific purposes. When a simple deletion won't suffice, or is too complex, or too complex for you today. Could be the case that 2 years later, you will convert it back to a close deletion because now you have the background knowledge and all of this. Now I'm starting on, I don't know, in chemistry, but I only know the basics, right? So the close deletion won't be that useful now. But once I master this, now I can do it. All of those nuances I can get implicitly now with close deletions that I couldn't before. Not because I'm better at close deletions, it's because now I'm better at the content I'm doing, chemistry, in this example. So if that doesn't work, you can convert it to Q&A or do more. So sometimes it's just you have another flashcard that supports one detail that escapes in the close deletion. I cannot capture this in a close deletion. It's just one detail or one exception to the rule. Then I have a QA asking for that, just that. So not always it's just replacing, converting to a QA. It's making a standalone QA on its own. Then, for definitions or more complex concepts that require a more structured question. Exactly. Could be the case that you still don't know, so this the bottleneck will be your knowledge formulation skills, not because you're not familiar enough with the content, then you do something. Q&A. Easy. And when you want to test your understanding from a different angle. Sometimes this is also useful because even if it looks redundant, doesn't contradict the minimum information principle. And a master incremental reader will use this. The true learning happens when you can see the same stuff from different angles, and this is just beautiful when you have that. So sometimes you just Q&A because you are like twisting this to analogy you did in the past for something similar, stuff like this. You can do Q&A on those cases because also it will be longer than usual. You can call these like connection items, stuff like that. So here we have seen just a few times. Again, in this course, we're not going to tackle explicit reformulation of knowledge. It will be its own course. That's why it's only high level and going always in consonance. You should care about this for incremental reading. If it's poorly knowledge formulation, it won't even be mentioned. So now you know. Should you always use close deletion? No. It's powerful? Yes. In the long term, it's powerful? Absolutely yes. But even though that doesn't mean you should always use Cloze. Sometimes Q&As work best. The best thing you can do is adapt, is identifying the case and adapting. That's the best skill you can do. We have seen already how to do close deletions. You just select the text, Alt-Z, and that's about it. But did you know you can do something else? And now I'm going to use the menu. I select the text, and it's reading. We have done this. Actually, it's called Remember Cloze with Alt-Z. There are two other options, Q Cloze, that we're not to cover in the Fluency track, and we're going to do now, that is the Schedule Cloze. There's no key binding for it, but hey, it's a schedule extract. It's exactly the same thing. In the schedule extract, you just add the shift modifier. Then, don't ask me why in close deletion you don't have the shift and that's it. There's no key binding, but it's the same behavior. I do the close deletion, and then I have the dialog right away, and I can modify the interval. I can say the interval, no, instead of 4, which is the one calculated, I could say otherwise, like 10, or I could use the calendar. No, I want this the last day of the month, whatever that is. Oh, it was 34 days. Okay. And you accept. Do you see now we have the same color? Means this has been closed. And here it is. That's the second close deletion. And the interval is 34. So it's the same thing as scheduling an extract, but at the second level of the loop. That is the close deletion. When this is useful, when you really know that, hey man, this is a very tiny detail, let's skip to the next month. Something that is low priority, basically. You really know that, so preemptively you can do it. But at the same time, you can do the same close deletion, Alt-Z, then navigate there and change here. I mean, this case has been 6, not 4. So now let me put 30 or 34. And let me decrease the priority and some other stuff. Here you go. So at the end of today is just convenience. You do two actions into one. Or another use case is, let's say that I'm going to do a few close deletions right away, and I want to preemptively combat interference. Let's say it will be a list. Then every time that I want to do the close deletion, I do the schedule because I want to make sure I will see them in different days. Is one option. You do it preemptively. If I'm lazy, I will always do remember close, and then I will open the children. Imagine there are 10 or more. And then I will just process them. And I schedule one per day. We will see this later, how to work with subsets. And as this is another example that you can get the same result in SuperMemo with many different ways. There's quite a lot of redundancy. So should you use that? In some situations, it's one way to do it. Not the only way to achieve that result, and in some outlier cases. If you are just fluent, you just can neglect it. And for the weird case, you will just go manually, alt left, change the interval or the priority preemptively. And that's about it. That has been, remember, schedule a close. You decide the day. Let's dig a little deeper with close deletions. It may happen to you that in SuperMemo, you try to do a close deletion. Let me go to the past. We did this close deletion before. You select the text, Alt-T, and you have mitochondria. Okay. Then you say, hey, I have mitochondria. Now I want this other one. Do you see? The powerhouse. So you will be tempted to select powerhouse, Alt-Z, and hey, you cannot execute close deletion on items. But hey, I want another flashcard to recall that as we've seen before. Yes, absolutely, but you should do it from the topic the original extract, not from one of the clozations you already did. You cannot do clozations on clozations. You just go to the parent and do the clozation. And there's no limit. So you can do a third, fourth. The longer the text, the more likely you'll do more. So there's no theoretical limit. But why you cannot create clozations on items? Do you remember the loop? You import, you read, you extract, you close. You don't close on closing. It's this loop, basically. But even though we have some support, the why not? So avoiding confusion and redundancy. A clozation is an already formed item and will create confusing counterproductive loop. One of the things you can do is duplicate the element and then reword it. This is still a thing. If the flashcard is true or false, you did the false statement and then you want the true statement. It's something you can do. So the duplicated will be a child of the original. Okay. And it could be the case that the true statement has one clause. Or if you really stretch it, let's say this is still a thing. But it will be something very, very outlier and just for your convenience. The duplicating is just convenience, so you don't start from scratch at the end of the day. It's redundant. Okay. So then, it can be counterproductive. So just don't do that. An item is by nature a distinct piece of information. It's already atomic. You started with a topic, and you have the flashcard. You cannot go back and forth unless you iterate. Therefore, you do the parent, which is the topic. It does make sense. Attempting to create a clozation from whoopsie-doopsie. An attempt to create a clozation, it'll be like trying to summarize a summary. If this makes sense. Then the developers of SuperMemo made a conscious design. They make a conscious design choice to prevent this. Maintain the clear distinction that you should go topic, that the flashcards, clozations start on passive material, which are topics. Easy. And then, because when you do this, something happens. You inherit the priority, you inherit the concept, if it's set, and some stuff. If you do it from a flashcard, the flashcard has different metrics. And the same metric may be used differently, like the A factor. A topic has an A factor. The item has an A factor. But for instance, an item, the A factor is useless now. It's not used at all. So if you borrow from an item, sometimes the values could be counterproductive. Then, prevent user errors. Newcomers. The ability to create clozation from an item could lead to a very massive ineffective collection and poorly formulated questions. In incremental reading, you have a lot of power. Too much power, as I usually say. You can still do this. So even though you cannot do a clozation, I can make still a duplicate. And here you go. In the duplicate, now I can move mitochondria is the now the cell. And here I paste it. Do you see? I achieved the same result as closing an item. In SuperMemo, you have quite a lot of redundancy. There's a very high chance you have multiple ways to achieve the same result. More or less, sometimes the result is just some detail. If you remember how we created concepts, sometimes one is log repetition, logs the repetition, some is just logs the repetition and then it's dismissed right away, but something very small. Same here. I can still do it, but Since it's a duplicate, I duplicated some elements, some properties. It's not exactly the same, even though in the practical sense, it may lead to the same place. And then, the third is to uphold the loading philosophy, the most important one. The process of actively extracting knowledge from a larger context. You start from the source, you chunk it down incrementally, and you make close deletions to decide what you want to remember. If you do this and that, it will have to be exceptions to the rule. Like I mentioned, true or false statement. That you want both versions. Stuff like that. Then, one analogy. Imagine a sculpture that doesn't chisel a new statue from a small finished figurine. A sculpture doesn't chisel a new statue from a small finished figure. That, hey, I had something already finished before, and I will make one of that smaller. By physics, has to be smaller, right? No, they go back to the original block of marble, or another block, and start a new creation. In SuperMemo, the topics are the marble, and items are the statues. Hope the analogy makes sense. That's why in SuperMemo, you don't do close deletions from items. Here we are going to define to see what we mean by a monster close deletion. If you remember, we have in extracts high and low granularity. So if you have low granularity, we will do more monster close deletions. So if I go to any random place, like here, perhaps not the best choice, okay, still. Theory of speech perception, okay. I have the main article, I will do this, okay. This is an extract. It's still quite a lot. So let's say that at least I don't need to scroll. So I will do still a secondary extract. I'm bypassing incrementalism now. Awesome. Since now I'm doing a rather low level of granularity, I will perform the close deletion right away. It turns out that one analyzes the sound spectrum of bump, for example, with a phone line along an acoustic continuum called voice onset time. And I do the monster close deletion right here. I could have just to tune it, just this little formulation as we have seen. No, I just do the monster close deletion. That is now how it looks in my template, that in this case I even have to scroll a little because of the metadata. So in this stage, this is what's called a monster close deletion, because it contains a lot of text and violates most of the 20 rules. It's not atomic and all of this. Then from now on, as I do the repetitions, iteratively, I'm going to reformulate this little by little until I have something more atomic. But the start is a monster close deletion. Then there's no official definition, it's just that it's very, very big. Do you need to scroll? So if it was like this, I can see all of the text. I need to scroll, but just for the metadata. Is this a monster close deletion? According to me, yes. Not as big as before, but hey, I can actually turn this iteratively, and I will going to simplify its repetition. Hey, this text is not required. I will reformulate this to be more succinct, until I have just an atomic flashcard. But the start is called close deletion, a monster close deletion. It is bad. Should you avoid that? Well, we will see this in the mastery track in more in depth. Just to let you know that it's the same as granularity. There are pros and cons. Should you do it? Yes. As long as it's low priority, you know the cons and the pros of what you're doing. It's a conscious choice. As long as it's conscious and it's low priority, you're good to go. So this is what we call a monster close deletion. We're going to see now some effects of priorities specifically for close deletions. Here I'm in outline of neuroscience, one random place. I'm going to do this extract. Okay. Then I will treat this already have these pops, and I will do some clozations. Pay attention to the priority. It's 30.6 or the position 42,969. What is the subdiscipline? Systems neuroscience. I made a clozation. What happened? 28.2. There's something constant in SuperMemo that whenever you perform an action on an element, increases the priority. Can be some cases, extracting or making clozation, not limited to just this. That I have done a clozation means that is important, it was useful, I started the flow, or I continue the incremental reading flow, the incremental reading loop. SuperMemo preemptively increases the priority without your permission, let's say. By design, it's like this. Then, if I click on Learn, and now I go back, it stays the same. That means that I will see this again. An umbrella term encompassing a number of other state concern. When what? And I do a second clozation. And now it's 26.5. It's even higher. That means incrementally, if I do this incrementally, every time, the priority will be slightly lower. Now it's easy because since I don't do any repetition in any other element, everything is static but this element. Therefore, it's ranking higher. But in incremental reading flow, I will do other clozations in other topics that they will also get higher priority. So some elements will keep ranking higher in the priority queue, and some they will go at the bottom because I will apply done. Well, they will become absolutely the dead last, and pushing the other folders depending how many you have them. But the folders will be at the bottom. If I have 10% of my priority queue and I have 10,000, it will be 1,000 to put it into tangible numbers. Nice. That means that if I do incrementalism, it will have a different effect if I do clozations right away. If I have high granularity or low granularity in clozations, or the same applies to extracting, the priority will be modified without you modifying it manually. Remember this detail. Inherits the and by the way, this is a big deal because the clozations also inherit from the source. But what happened? That the source every time has higher priority. That means that if I do 10, let's say to simplify, 10 clozations back to back, every clozation will have higher and higher priority because the source, the topic, keeps increasing its priority. The lower the priority, the higher the jump. Or the higher the priority, the lower the jump because there is fewer steps to get to the maximum, if this makes sense. So have this into mind, that this is like the umbrella, this is like the butterfly effect. A very small, tiny 2% today, this can make a difference that you are going to see this eventually, or you are not going to see this ever again because of the priority protection. We'll never reach that number. The question is not if it's good or if it's bad. It's use it knowing the pros and the cons, as always. Let's take a different perspective, a different detail about clozations. So now we know what is a clozation, how you create them. They're always there, scheduled. But hey, why the pattern is still there? So if I have the other one, the mitochondria, I'm done with it, right? In this case, it's dismissed because I treat this as a slide. I'm repurposing this. It's not actually incremental reading per se, right? It's not meant for me. It's meant to be displayed for the video. So what's going to happen? I will have this memorized. I will make the clozation. I will click on Learn. I will continue whatever there is. But hey, this continues to be scheduled. It's scheduled for tomorrow. Then why is that? Because of incrementalism. Not because I have done one clozation, I'm done. Perhaps it could be the case that I'm really done, I just don't know. But in the next iteration, I will read that, I reach the end, and what I will do is apply done instead. But that is a manual choice. Because sometimes it could be the case like this, that in the second repetition, I do a second close deletion, and a third, a fourth. You never know how many you will need. That's why SuperMemo cannot know once you're actually done, qualitatively done, until you just do apply done, as we have seen. And at the end of the day, when it's fully processed, you will have only folders and items. So if you don't take action, SuperMemo will always prompt with the topic until you're done. Easy. So let's cover something important. In SuperMemo, there are no new flashcards, new items. That's a very big difference. If you come from Anki, or should we say, to simplify, virtually any flashcard app, you have the concept of a new flashcard. That is because what you did before to reach that flashcard is not known by the app, because it's not covered. The flow, the learning flow, is not covered by the app. Okay, then you have rem note that, okay, now I have, at some degree, I have part of the flow. Until I go, I end up with a flashcard. Nice. But usually the case is that you create a flashcard manually, by import, by AI, or it's a shared deck, so you use someone else's content, and that is new. In incremental reading, there's no such case. There are never new cards. Every time that I do a close deletion, this will be already in my queue. This is already a flashcard with an interval. In this case, tomorrow. I just did it, and the creation of the flashcard is the first repetition. That's why the repetition history says first. But no, I have never seen this yet in a flashcard format, which is true. I will see it tomorrow. But what it does, so at least how it's implemented in SuperMemo, there is no concept of new, something that is in the limbo. You could do something that we're not going to see in the Fluency track, and is to queue a close deletion. Usually you will put remember. We can schedule, you decide the interval, the priority, and so on, is two steps into one, or you could do a queue close that sends it to the pending queue instead of the priority queue. This could be more or less equivalent of a new card, but this is not a thing. In incremental reading, as soon as there was a priority queue, as soon as the priority queue was introduced in incremental reading, the pending queue become irrelevant. So if I really do this in SuperMemo, then yes, it will be a new card because it is born already in a limbo. But that's not a thing. It has never been a thing for the last 2 decades. So in incremental reading, this will never happen. Once you create the flashcard, it will be scheduled. Today you create other flashcards will be scheduled. Then there's a topic for a different video. That's why you shouldn't care. No, I want to limit 10 flashcards a day or 20 flashcards a day. This is pointless. In incremental reading, you have priorities to manage the workload. So, how many you do a day? Irrelevant. How many new items you create a day? Irrelevant. If you create more, that means that fewer will make it, and more will have to wait. That's it. As easy as that. That is a focus that if you come from Anki, it will take a while for you. But I only want to tackle the dimension that there is not a new card. If you really stretch it, we can have it. Or if you import from XML, that we are not going to see either in the Fluency track. But in incremental reading, you're not going to see it. It's not possible. You have to use some other obscure methods in SuperMemo that do not represent incremental reading to achieve a new card. And why? The reasons? Because it doesn't make any sense. If you do incremental reading, you create your own items, if you create your own items, you will create them on the spot when it happens, and that's it. There's no need to put it in a limbo and to mark them as new. Hope this makes sense. Now we're going to focus in a qualitatively 3 different philosophies how to make resolutions. We have seen before in the prior layer, in the incremental loading loop, how to extract high granularity, low granularity, and so on. So based on this, we can have an immediate formulation. So I do the clozation and I reformulate right away, or incrementally, iteratively, or some hybrid approach. So let's start with the immediate formulation, the bricklayer or the architect approach. This treats new cloze as a brick that must be perfectly designed and fired before it's placed into the wall of your knowledge. The goal is to do it right once. So you do Alt-G and you spend 15, 30 seconds, I know, some time to reformulate a little. So it's not the best, but it's already one iteration preemptively. You don't wait this to become outstanding and see the item in the item format. So you create the monster clozation, and at least you will spend 15 seconds deleting some sentences that are not required to answer the question, preemptively. This is the bricklayer or the architect approach. Then what are the merits or the advantages? Low friction reviews. When you see this on your daily reviews, it's more smooth, fast, and satisfying because you don't have monster clozulations, for instance. It's high reliability. It's safer because you have spent more time. You have paid most of the cost already, preemptively. So it ensures more quality, atomicity, applicability, because you have asked your questions to yourself already. Therefore, as a consequence, reduces the cleanup depth. It prevents the opposite if I do AI and I generate a lot of flashcards. Prevents a build-up of poorly formulated items or items that are fine, are correct, but are just, I don't care about them. Are just details that are not worth remembering. You prevent that. How? Because you have spent a lot of time asking your questions. Is this applicable? Is this just for me? Does this link to something I know, as we have seen in previous videos? But what's the trade-off? Breaks the initial flow. Because I have to spend this time. Each time I'm not doing the regular flow. I'm in formulation mode kind of thing. It feels slower because I pay most of the price at the beginning. And the snapshot in time. The question is based on your understanding at that moment. You sacrifice incrementalism. If I have a monster clozation, I have more opportunities to refine it because at every time I will have more knowledge. If I do this up front, not the entire thing, but a significant portion, is what I have limited to myself today. So later, it's already quite atomic, in the third iteration, let's say, but I still don't have the same knowledge that I will have had in the other philosophies with the incremental approach. So remember, this has been the bricklayer or the immediate formulation when you do clozulations. It's qualitative. Let's cover now the other approach when you create clozulations, and it's the incremental approach, the most hardcore, let's say, also known as the Sculptor approach. We have used a similar analogy, that you cannot create a clozulation out of another clozulation, like in a sculpture. You create a sculpture from a block, not from another sculpture, kind of thing. So this philosophy is more or less the opposite of the bricklayer. The view of a new clozulation is not as a finished brick, but as a rough block of marble. You will take incrementalism stages that, hey, that is just a draft, and for being the draft is fine. Next iteration. So you press Alt-Z to create immediately to create the clozulation, the flashcard, creating a quick imperfect close, or could be a monster clozulation basically. Then you will wait for the first repetition as an item format, the block reappears. It's clunky, hard to answer, you may fail it. There's a lot of noise and so on. But as a sculpture, you will just shaving off the most obvious imperfection, spend perhaps 5 seconds improving it, not 30, and take it incrementally. So something you have done as a bricklayer, perhaps you will need 6 repetitions or 5 repetitions to have spent the same time. You just do what's more obvious. One action, and that's it. The second iteration could be days or weeks later, slightly less chunky block appears. Now you have a little more knowledge because you have read something in parallel, you have seen other items and so on. So now you have a better way to shape it. Perhaps just a 5-second edit, but it's something that the current self of some weeks ago was not able to perform. Anti-subsequent, the third, and almost there's no limit. Even if the intervals are into years, you can still get some opportunity to rephrase it. What are the merits of this approach? The good aspects. The philosophy is pure. You take incrementalism on its pure format. If the content, how it's written, it's friendly, you don't have any deadline, you can take this route, the most pure route. Leverages feature, and you get all of the perks of incrementalism. Leverages feature knowledge, because the best question you can write on day 30 is often better than the best you can do on day 1. A consequence of the incrementalism, basically. Because your understanding of the topic has matured, you have identified the knowledge gaps, and so on. And it has a maximum initial flow. Basically, it's the opposite of saying that you pay preemptively the least amount of tax possible. It's the minimum upfront cost. Therefore, it's the absolute fastest way to get through a new article. You just do the lazy or monster close deletions, and you will pay the cost incrementally. What are the cons or the risks of this discipline? It requires immense discipline. So what's the cost of this approach? The required discipline. Immense. Because you have a temptation to just fail. Oh, that's a massive close deletion. It's garbage. I don't want to see it again. I will fail or I will delete it. No, you have to take this iteratively. But you just don't use AI to have the final format. You do the mental process every time. Therefore, as a consequence, you will have an initial high friction because you have to tolerate the monsters. They are ugly and painful to read, right? So your daily reviews, especially the flashcards that are only seen for the first time, will be reformulated, can be frustrating in the early ages and so on. Even though in the long term are the best, it's like when you have a kid. Oh yeah, it's very rewarding to have children and so on. But when they are very tiny, toddlers, they are just crying, they don't let you sleep, rest, and stuff like this. If I know the analogy is there, it's so, but you get the point. Early stage is hell, but later on, it's the opposite. And it's not beginner friendly, because even though you do monster close deletions, you are aware it's a monster close deletion. So you know how to make it simpler, more atomic, avoid lists or sets, and all of the reduce ambiguity, and all of the rules there are, principles in the formulation. A newbie will do this because they are not even knowledgeable. They don't know better. It's a massive difference because when they see this for the second, third time, they are not going to distill it better. They are not going to keep it shaping, to shape it incrementally like in a sculpture. It will still be a block until it becomes unmanageable and it's just garbage. So this is the second approach with close deletions and incremental reading, which I called the Sculptor approach or the incremental formulation. The true pathway. Now we will see the hybrid, the in-between approach that is immediate at some degree and incremental at some degree, which I'll call the gardener approach, when you create close deletions. It's like a middle path combines the low friction to capture of the sculpture and the high quality formulation of the bricklayer, but adds a critical time delay. That needs to be in bold. It's already in bold, okay. So a gardener doesn't create finished blocks or a sculpt stone. They walk through their garden, sow many seeds, and then come back later to see what sprouts. You need what? Delay. They have to grow, right? It doesn't happen overnight. Then they decide what to nurture, what to prune, and what to pull out as weed. That is the choice. They are making questions to themselves. Is this useful? Do I want this? Is this relevant? Instead of deleting, will be like pruning and stuff like this. So this translates to two-phase workflow into SuperMemo. Two phases. Sowing the seeds, equivalent of extracting, and tending the garden, equivalent to review and formulation pass. So what happens at the beginning? Sowing the seeds. When you read a new article, you exclusively use extract. You don't create any close deletions at this stage. Why? Because the close deletions will be performed on extracts, not through the source directly. Unless the source fits in your screen without scrolling, then it will be a really small source. So you might read a sentence, a paragraph, whatever, a chunk of text. Seems interesting, insightful, or potentially important. There's something here. Make the extract. And you immediately continue reading. You continue with the flow. You don't pay preemptively. You continue with your flow. You read the next element. This process is extremely fast and low friction. You're not committing to anything. You are simply collecting the seeds, passage that might be valuable, perhaps you're wrong, and there turns out it's worthless, and you're building a pool of curated, high potential material without the mental overhead of formulating perfect questions. I'm getting a lot of the value super quick. I don't spend time for the diminishing returns. Then the next phase, tending the garden, which now, since I did an extract, I will review not the source, but the extract I did, and the close deletion I will do. So days, weeks, or whatever time later, those extracts, which are the seeds, will begin to appear daily in my review queue, outstanding queue. Now, with the benefit of time and fresh perspective because of the delay, you tend the garden. For each extract that appears, you make a conscious decision. And that's the key. It's conscious, premeditated. You're doing it because you know what you want. I want this, therefore I have to do this and that in SuperMemo. And that becomes second nature. Promote it to a flower. You create a close deletion. It becomes an item. It becomes active recall. So you recognize its value. Now you perform a bricklayer action. Now you spend time on it. You select the key phrase, select that, close deletion. You have nurtured the promising seed into a permanent flower. Poetic. Now you pull the weed, because deleting. You look at the extract and you think, why I did this? This is now obsolete, it's not what I thought, I misunderstood that, or I couldn't understand, and just in case, let it pass. And then it was wrong, whatever that is, then you apply done. As a consequence, you delete it. Or just dismiss it in case you still want to have this in hits in the search. Then, this crucial filtering step is one of the other methods, philosophies, approaches lack. The bricklayer, the sculpture doesn't have that. You're actively weeding your collection. preventing and importing information from taking root. So, you are actually spending some time deleting stuff. The incremental will never delete almost anything because it's just postponing and postponing. It's like a perpetual postpone. It's there, it's garbage, it's useless, but you haven't spent time to detect this trash in your collection. You know it's there, but you don't locate it. And the other one does this immediately, the Bricklayer. So I create, if you really want to make it simpler, I create the extract right away if it's too large, and right away after 5 seconds I make the close deletion and apply it on immediately. The other extreme. So, and the third is that you let it grow. Is that you keep it as an extract. You do iterations, repetitions. You're still unsure about the extract value, or there is still more value. You need just more repetitions. You just keep it. You just review and let it come back again later. And when you give the seed more time to prove its worth. That is the case. Awesome. That is not. Then you pull the weed and delete it. Some flowers will be prettier. Some flowers will take longer to breathe and to shine, right? To follow the analogy. So more or less, gets the best of the two worlds, but it's not 50-50, or it's not always the same. Depending on the concepts, how much I care, I can be less hybrid and go more to the immediate formulation. And something that is lower priority for me, let's say chemistry, I can go more to the Sculptor approach. It's still a hybrid, but it's more 80-20, not 50-50 or 60-40. That's the beauty. I can navigate as much as I want and be as flexible as I want, following my instincts, that how much I care about this. No, I really care about this. I will wait to see the flower grow. Or, I don't care, I will do it like that. If I don't see the flower, no big deal. More or less, those are the three approaches, qualitatively through an analogy. We have seen three approaches, different approaches, qualitatively, how to manage the close deletions in this stage of the incremental loading loop. The Bricklayer, or architect, the Sculptor, the most hardcore incrementalist, and the gardener, who is more or less a hybrid, is in the middle. So we're going to see a few features, how they behave differently, so it's easier to grasp their difference. The primary tool, you will see it's Cloze. Cloze, extract initially. The gardener, first you extract, then you do close deletion. Close deletion is now the first action. That's the only difference. The difference between the Bricklayer and the Sculptor is that this, Cloze, is more incremental, and perhaps this, the Alt Z, is done in the same repetition. You do 5 close deletions right away. But it's the same thing. Then the correction is that you reformulate immediately. You create a flashcard and you reformulate it right away. The Sculptor will wait until this pops in the repetitions, and the gardener will first curate and then formulate. You have 2 stages. You only do one phase of the action. Nice. What about the workflow? The Bricklayer is just a simple step. You create. That's it. This flashcard is good enough. It's not perfect, but it's the workflow of the Sculptor is continuous evolution, or therefore it's never finished. You always think as it's enough for now, this can be improved, but it will be in the next iteration. And the gardener is just 2 steps. Extract and decide. Extract and decide. The initial friction, the Bricklayer is medium, because you break the flow. You spend a lot of time in one repetition, and then you continue, boom, you spend a lot of time, you never have this flow. The Sculptor is the lowest. It's the fastest capture, therefore the lowest friction. You almost don't pay tax. The metaphor that I use across the videos. And the gardener is low, which makes sense between the Sculptor and the Bricklayer. It's low stakes. It's fast, but you pay a little time because you have to make some decisions. You have to ask some, even if it's heuristic, some questions. What about the friction when it's in the review, so therefore in the flashed format already? Bricklayer, lowest, because it, among the three, has the highest quality already. The flashcard you have spent the highest time during the reformation period. So are not clean, let's say are the cleanest. Not necessarily it's clean. Then the Sculptor are the highest review friction because are messy, are monster close deletions. You could even need to scroll. And Gardner, once again, in the middle. Require decisions. So it's cognitively taxing because you take decisions, but it doesn't create as much friction as seeing monster close deletions every time. What about the benefits? The Bricklayer has high quality from the start. So from now on, if you fail, you have lapses or unleashes, you don't have to worry much because you have rather good quality. The Sculptor adapts to new knowledge. It's very dynamic. Could be that some you don't, some flashcards it's good enough, some flashcards you will leach, some flashcards you will leach so much that you will delete. But deleting this, because of incrementalism, you will create flashcards somewhere else with more knowledge that you will prevent this occurrence in the future. Other flashcards, instead of being messy, will be less messy because of more or less of your awareness. You have the awareness of this knowledge was crappy, or your understanding of this was limited, because you could reply, you could answer, recall the answer, but not the sense making. So it's very chaotic, it looks terrible, but at the end of the day, it's the one that is more adaptable to the new knowledge because of incrementalism. So the benefit is the highest, but in the long term. And the gardener, again, should be always in the middle. You have the delayed judgment, you take some decisions and actually required, yes, but some other decisions are delayed. So you still have an opportunity to gather more knowledge and so on. Not to the same extent as the Sculptor, but you get the benefits of both worlds, the architecture and incrementalism. And what about the risks? The Bricklayer, you have premature formulation. Perhaps you spend a lot of time for a flashcard that is somewhat good formulated, but then the purpose is, it's not applicable, it's date or the, that the lifespan which is dated up to 2 years will become obsolete, but I already paid the time. I already spent the time. The Sculptor, the opposite, is the knowledge large, the indiscipline. So the risk that you have is not to be consistent with the discipline it requires. As soon as you start making exceptions, let's just delete this horrible flashcard, or just let me pass it as 3, as okay. This indiscipline will have consequences. And the gardener is forgetting to weed the garden. That's the only risk. You need to delete stuff, to curate it. You need space for the new generation to flourish and so on. You cannot have unlimited flowers breeding at the same time. You need to delete stuff. And if you don't, is the risk it will be. It will become unmanageable in the long term. So more or less those are the pros and cons and the features of those 3 philosophies. And remember, they are very distinct to each other. You don't have to be dead on one or another. But it's so the extremes of the spectrum, so it's easiest to understand. Where you should start? Whatever you want. You should aim at the Sculptor as long as you can. If you don't have limits, deadlines, or anything, to get the maximum results. But if it creates too much friction, because creates a lot of friction, is the highest, just do the gardener. This is what I do. For high priority, I do the gardener. So for most of the stuff, I'm the Sculptor. But for the very high or very low priority, both, I am the gardener. And sometimes I cheat, I do the bricklayer with AI when it's short term or when I'm experimenting. So today I'm using both 3 philosophies in my collection. But one perhaps is only applied to language learning, not to anything, so it's not as easy one-dimensional. Hope this has been clear. Now we're going to see what is applying done. So usually I have the flow that I may do an extract, I may do a close deletion, and then I reach the end, and hey, I'm letting SuperMemo know that I reached the end, there's nothing else I can do. The next time this pops in my repetition, there's nothing I can do either. Therefore, I will apply done to let SuperMemo know I'm done with it. I can do Ctrl-Shift, Enter. Do you want to remove all element contents from the collection? Yes. Why? Because everything here is redundant. I have this in the flashcard below. And if I did the extracts, I have the content on the extracts. All of the content I wanted, it's duplicated already. So everything here is already redundant. So yes, remove it. And then, ignore this element in learning. Yes, it will dismiss it. Why you will want to say no? Say yes. So now it's a folder, and I had the flashcard that I just created. Awesome. So now let me cheat. I delete the flashcard. Now I do apply an article template once again. I don't care if it's dismissed because I'm not going to do the repetition, but I'm going to apply done. And because hey, I have read everything, there was nothing meaningful, no golden nugget, nothing I wanted to actually remember. I will apply done, Ctrl-Shift, Enter, remove, yes. But what happens now? It's not asking me if I want to dismiss the element. It's asking me if I want to delete it. Why? Because it's a leaf. There's no hierarchy down, meaning extracting, closing, duplicating, and some other obscure features that I could use. No. Therefore, in this text I have read, but nothing was worth remembering. So that's it. It's just deleted. It has been processed. It's the best outcome. So remember, applying done has 2 outcomes. Dismissing and converting the element to a folder, or getting rid, deleting the element in this case. And it's the latest step of the incremental reading flow. You import, you start doing the repetitions, so you start reading, then you may extract, you may do close deletion, and finally you apply done. As easy as that. Now that we have introduced apply done feature, the question is what is exactly deleted, right? In this very same element, this has been applied done. So actually, all of the components are deleted when I apply done, okay. Not only that, the repetition history is kept, it's not deleted, so what it does is a reset on the repetition history, nothing else than that, and the background color is kept. And usually that will be of the template you have used, usually. That's why sometimes I have different colors. This is white, let me see, and this is black. Because at that time I was using a template that was black and that's it. So what's kept when you apply done? The background color, the repetition history, the element in the knowledge tree. It's just kept as a folder. So the title, the place, and so on, it's also kept. And strictly speaking, the status is also kept. It's the second step. Let me do one example. Now I apply done to this. If I say no, it's still memorized. So strictly speaking, set done can also keep the status of the element. So I just got rid of the HTML component and the image components. Let's see one other example. That's a good example. I have 2 images and the text HTML component. Do you see? 1 HTML, 2 images. I apply done, and now I have nothing. but I do keep the repetition at the time that I did the dismissing. But hey, it's because I dismiss it. What happened with the other one that I didn't dismiss? The trigger side. I didn't modify the repetition history because the repetition history is modified by the dismissing, not by the done. So strictly speaking, the done does not alter the repetition history. Get rid of the components. So if you had one menu, components, and delete all components, it will have the same effect as applying done. Usually what you want is to also dismiss to become a folder. So to simplify in the practical sense, we will say that it also dismisses the element and as a consequence also modifies, adds one repetition here. Let's actually do it. Let's dismiss it. And now we have the repetition. Instead of the future, it's already dismissed because we reset. And that's about it. Then as a consequence in the stats, it will change the dismissed will increase, the memorized will decrease by 1, and all of that. But this is a consequence of changing the status of the element, not because we are applying done. So in one sentence, what is exactly deleted when applying done in SuperMemo? The components of the element are deleted. Well, for the Fluency track, it's like this. Just as a sneak peek of the Mastery track, is that, hey, what happened that I deleted some images, right? Okay, let me add it manually. So I insert this. What happened now that this image registry component is only used here in this element, berberine. So I can go to the image registry, berberine, it's here. Okay. But now, if I do apply done, Ctrl-Shift-Enter, it's asking me, remove unused member from image registry, because SuperMemo automatically, when a member becomes unused, it will be deleted. That's why, if you really stretch it by applying done, not by it, but as a consequence, you can reduce the usage of a member to 0, and therefore deleting its existence. Could be a consequence. I will say yes. And then I dismiss it. So now the image I had in the registry is no longer there. I have lost it. But those are already the basic returns. Because remember, in SuperMemo, if you want to dig the rabbit hole, you can do it big time. And I could speak for hours about every specific detail that it's kept or not. Just a peek of the mastery track. Now that we know how to apply done, we will do this in bulk. This is especially useful that, okay, I move on. So let me go here, language. You know what? I'm done with Greek. I'm not going to do anything else. So I want to keep what I have at least. I want to delete what I didn't start, it was in the middle, and so on. And I will have some hierarchy. So what isn't processed, this will be kept because I have an element here. Awesome. And some are fully are applied done, like this. Some are not. Okay. So what I will do is I open this on the browser. Now I filter for convenience memorized and only topics by the T. It's convenience. You can apply done to items. Please don't do it. You may trigger something, some rare bug. So now I apply done. How I do it? Process browser, learning, and apply done. Because done is one step of the learning process. Okay. Execute done, and finally SuperMemo includes yes to all. Nice. As you can see in the ancestors window and the status bar, it updates one by one. So what's going to happen? That what was chatless becomes deleted, do you see? And some they don't. Why? because they contain children. They contain children. So what I'm going to do now is filter once again by memorized. Do you see now I have only 39 and I have to do it once again. Why? Because perhaps I had hierarchy. So one topic had a child as a topic, one extract, but the extract I didn't do the closing. So I just applied done to the child. Now I need to apply done to the parent. So I will delete the cases that I did an extract and that's it, if this makes sense. For instance, let me do one example. Let me see, where am I? Here. Do you see? In this case it's done, but not the parent yet. Okay. So now I go back. So I go back and I do apply the same. You may need to do this for every level of hierarchy. If you had, only one? No, I don't believe that. Let me do it again. Okay. That's weird because they're still memorized. So in this case, quit the subset, and let's refresh and do it once again. And only topics, and now let's do it once again. Learning and done. That's the bug. I think this happens with SuperMemo 19. Do you see now? We applied done, there are no contents, but didn't ask me to what? To dismiss it. So actually it worked, it didn't do the dismissing. So I will need to do it manually. Awesome. Now we can check that because we have only folders and items. Nice. Do you see here it's justified because we have another level of hierarchy, but it's still applied done. Do you see? And then we have the same pattern. Awesome. So this is good because now I only keep what I already invested time, and that's it. I don't continue. That's one of the main use cases of applying done in bulk. And remember, you may do this more than once, and if you have really nested extracts, you need to do it at least for the worst case scenario, that you had one branch that you have 4 levels, you'll need to do it 4 times. Still, the process is very quick to do. Now we have the question that, okay, so if you see here in my knowledge tree, I have a lot of folders. Those folders are what? Did I apply done on them, or they are just dismissed? If I click one at random, hey, this has a template. I didn't apply done here. It just dismissed. Same here. It has a title. So now it's applied done. How do I know that? Because first, there's no template. If I take a look at the template, we'll say no template, and there is no registry. There is no component. Absolutely empty. That's how I know it is. Then it's the same. The background color is different because of what used the template has been left like this. Same, pam, pam, pam. Hey, references, this is not done, right? So at least we have seen that looking at the element window, we can distinguish this. Okay, but what if we open this on the browser, then let me filter. Okay. And only the non-memorized. Let me actually filter dismissed. Okay. So everything here are dismissed elements in the branch of the SuperMemo course. How do I know it's in a slideshow that is dismissed so it doesn't appear in my repetitions, or it's just a folder? There's a trick you can do, and I don't mean going one by one. It's because, for instance, here there is text, and there is one component. In SuperMemo, we cannot filter that has components or has a template. Sadly, we cannot do that. But what we can do at least is sort by text size. So now I'm getting something that has text. Do you see? The longer to the shortest. Awesome. So eventually, I have 0 content. Do you see? Pam pam. There's is the title. Here you go. So from collection management and below that, there's no content. The only limitation is that, well, wait, there's no content, but there are components. It's just empty components. So then what I can do, if I really want to stretch it, is I will do a subset. No worries what I'm doing now. We will tackle this later. Now this is a subset of empty content. So there are no text. So now what I will do is what we have seen before. Apply done learning and done. I will apply done in bulk. And after I apply done in bulk, what I have done basically is getting rid of the components. As easy as that. So from now on, it's either text with HTML components or text components, or completely empty with no components at all. That's how I distinguish them. Then there's no rule of thumb, so I have to sort by text and just take a peek manually until I get to the first that is empty. So there's some trial and error here, and that's how we distinguish this. This is how we distinguish an apply done, like reference, we distinguish like this, close deletion, which has text but this is missed, or it's empty but still has the component, to something like this that is completely applied done. Because in the history, it will always say dismissed. We cannot distinguish just dismissed as applied done and dismissed at the same time. So now you know how to distinguish those. In some weird scenarios and common scenarios, you may want to do this, especially when cleaning your collection. You don't want to get rid of content, right? So now that we know what is applying done, Ctrl-Shift-Enter, we're going to see when you should use it. There are 3 scenarios. First, when the topic is fully exhausted, you have read all of the contents. You reach the end, like in this case. So I have read, extracted what I wanted, make the close deletions of what I wanted. There's no more text, I'm done. So I'm letting SuperMemo know that I'm done reading this article, this topic. That's it. Next is that I'm done from my side. That, hey, I don't care, even if there's more text, it's irrelevant, it's low quality. I don't care, I move on. Therefore, it's like a book that I will return, or I will get on the shelves and never read it again. Same thing. So I just apply done, and I will keep what I had. That, okay, it was very long, but I only got 8 extracts. Well, it's something, right? Or when it's completely obsolete already. That now I do my rep, disappears. It was best marketing techniques for 2018. This is time sensitive at some degree, at least per year. Now this is history of. And if I don't care about history of marketing, I will just apply done. It's the same as deleting, but I don't delete right away because I want to keep what I have. Therefore, I apply done. If I had nothing, it's childless, then it will be the same as deleting. And third, when my learning goals have changed. And this may be done in bulk. That, hey, I was testing to, I don't know, learning a language, especially Japanese, then, I I don't like it. And I don't need it for my job or for my life or anything, so I just move on. So what I do, I apply done on the branch of Japanese. So I keep what I had process, and that's about it. So those are the three correct cases, because you can apply done in other scenarios when it's not what you want, actually. Now we're going to see when not to apply done, or the common mistakes that people may be prone to apply done when you shouldn't. First, when you're simply bored or tired today. Today I'm not in the mood for reading this. This is qualitatively different from what we said before, is when you just change your goals, right? So if it's just today because I'm tired, tomorrow I will continue learning Japanese or whatever, you'll have deleted everything. So if it's just today, do a subset instead. Or hit the next repetition and move on. Don't apply done. Next is when the topic, the content, is too difficult. Instead of applying done, what you will do instead is postponing. Or if it's really, really a long shot, you will just dismiss it. You want to keep it in your collection, and perhaps in 3 years you will be able to dig into that. Third is when the topic is mostly unread and processed, meaning that it's too soon to take the decision that, hey, we have said that if the topic is irrelevant or low quality or even obsolete, even if there is still more content unread, you will apply done. This is true. But sometimes it's done too prematurely. Then you discover, if you have put on 2 more minutes, you will have discovered one golden nugget, Usually that is a mistake. That's usually when you identify that holds no value, you will deprioritize, move on, and if this appears again, you will confirm, okay, my past self was right, I apply done. But you make the decision later, not on the spot. So more or less, those are the 3 cases. And a reminder, that done is final and cannot be undone. It's not a temporary snooze button. Read for later. That doesn't happen. Well, yeah, in SuperMemo you can do it, of course, but not with applying done. So everything that is temporary, just don't apply done. That is more or less a premise of done. Here is a diagram flow about the topic repetition. So in SuperMemo, when you click on next and a topic pops up, what you do? It's very high level. Let's see that. So first, the topic is shown. You orient yourself what I'm seeing, right? Okay, here you can read an increment. You're not going to read the entire topic, even if there's more text. I'm here. You could say, hey, let's analyze the chunk. Perhaps it's already too difficult, so you just postpone it right away. Oh no, let's analyze further. And what's the nature of the text I'm reading? It's a golden nugget. Did I find a golden nugget? I will stop reading, select the text, and make an extract or a clozation right away. Depending how large it is, if it fits my screen, perhaps I want a clozation. Depends on what? On the granularity you work with. And you move on from the next repetition already. Then, if you keep going, eventually, perhaps it's not the first repetition, you just reach the end of the article. You have read everything, all of the contents. So you will just apply done. And that's it. End of the story. Then could be the case that you analyzing the chunk, during reading, you can also do all of those actions. What you see in yellow are actions. Actions performed in SuperMemo. You can reprioritize, set a higher or lower priority. You can postpone as one of the options that was before. It's too difficult, you will postpone it, but this postpone will mark the end of the repetition. You can do it for later. So you modify the position of the queue without being postponed. You can actually edit the text yourself. That can be reformulating or rewording the content or deleting some content. You can also insert images, you can set concepts or template. You can set a template directly. I want the image article. Or no. I set the concept, memory concept, and this because it has the checkbox, it will auto apply a template indirectly. And I can also split. It's not just extracting, I can do also a split. So I can do all of these during the repetition, during the reading. Then if we go back, orient ourselves, perhaps it's the very first repetition. Okay, what I'm going to do? I do the high-level judgment. Remember the heuristics we have seen, the questions you will ask to yourself, the GPS, framework, and so on. Then, is it valuable? Boom, you will read an increment. Perhaps what you will do is, I will skim that and split it right away. Or I will modify the priority, apply a template, and split it, or whatever. Then, in case it's no, so the judgment says, no, this is not valuable, not relevant, or not worthy, or it's a duplicate, or it's redundant, I will just apply done, because the topic is useless. And applying done will convert it to a folder, and I will keep what I have done on the prior repetitions. And if it's the very first one, I will just delete the element, and that's it. So it looks like a lot of stuff, but believe me, this is very high level. So this is very different from an item that you will just think of the question, try to recall, then show the answer, check if you have answered the same, judge if it's the same answer or it's semantically equivalent, and then judge how hard it was or if it's wrong, and you decide the recall option, and that's about it. You can always reformulate as well, or do any of those. Reprioritize, postpone, insert an image, set a concept or a template. But you cannot split, for instance, or extract. So for now, this is like a recap of all of the process that can happen while you do a topic repetition, also known as review. And you will do this instinctively. So you go to SuperMemo, set a wave, bada boom. Hey, what happens here? It's the first repetition I do. Is this relevant? Do I care about this? This deserves the current priority. What is the nature of this? What is the context? It's a Wikipedia page. Therefore, I already know that it will be split friendly and all of that. And it's the theta wave. Oh, now I remember that I import that from the sleep. Okay, where am I? I am in the dummy contents, 2024. I didn't decide the concept. So perhaps in this repetition, what I'm going to do is decide which concept this deserves, and perhaps split. For instance, I don't care about the history and all of that. I only care about something specific about the sleep pattern, right? Relationship, mechanisms, generators. So then, I only care about humans, not in other primates. Okay. So what I'm going to do in this case is the very first step, the very first rep. I did the high judgment. Yes, it's valuable enough. I have enough. I do pass the checklist. I have one, so it's enough. It's valuable. I now read some increments, analyze the chunk, and then during the reading, I will do a split. I first will set a concept of a sleep, then I will split, and perhaps edit some part of the text. If now I go to one extract that I did before, let's say I see this is this is an extract. In mathematics, a conjecture, okay, so this is a definition. So I want this is relevant, I want to remember that, so I will do, for instance, a close deletion. And that's it. Or perhaps it's no, let me first reprioritize, this is too low, let me put it at 11, and now I do the close deletion. Or perhaps I wanted to add a picture, of conjecture, I will add it and then do the close deletion. So there are a lot of possible combinations. But what I did is that it was not the first repetition. So I found a golden nugget. It was the definition of conjecture. I stopped reading, I selected the text, and I did the close deletion. But there was an extract, a secondary extract already, an extract of an extract. So even though it was the very first repetition, the judgment was really quick. I went there, increment, read increment, analyze chunk, because it was a one-liner. It was very quick to analyze that. If it's the very first, but it's an entire article, I will need more time to analyze all of that. But it will be quick. Very quick and heuristic. So now you know the simplistic, high-level diagram of what your brain will think while you read topics in SuperMemo. That's all for now. See you incrementally.